Hey, and we got the next story about Sydney, about Australia. And before we start the story, I want to ask you some questions about Australia. So tell me, what's the capital of Australia? First you repeat my question, very good. What's the capital of Australia? Okay, so what's the capital of Australia? Answer my question. Do you know the capital? Capital. You know the word capital? So capital is a main city in Australia where there is a government and president. It's the most important city. Yeah, and that's right, it's Canberra. What other big cities are there? Or maybe, do you know any cities in Australia? Okay. Do you know any other cities in Australia? Do you know cities in Australia? Okay, very good. Sydney, yeah, that's right. Melbourne, Perth. Okay, can you tell me what's Australia famous for? What's Australia famous for? So when I say Australia, what are you thinking about, or what do you think about? Or what is typically Australian? For example, kangaroos, right? Kangaroos, koalas, okay? Sydney Opera House. Okay, a lot of dangerous spiders, right? Insects, snakes maybe. Okay, very good. And now we do the story. A Tale of Two Sydneys. Tale? What do you know the word tale? T-A-L-E, tale. Tale is like a story. Tale, story. Synonym is a story. Last April, two British teenagers wanted to go to Australia. Last April, two British teenagers wanted to go to Australia for their summer vacation. You understand, right? Okay, now repeat. First you understand and then you repeat. Last April, two British teenagers wanted to go to Australia for their summer vacation. Okay, for the summer vacation. And it's the second type of the sentence, right? Is it second type or first type? Second type, yes, because there is a real verb want. If there is a real verb in a sentence, then it is the second type of the sentence. And if there is no real verb, then it's a first type. For example, cat is black. There is no real verb, so we can say it's a first type of the sentence. Okay, last April, two British teenagers wanted to go to Australia for their summer vacation, but it was a 24-hour trip by plane. But it was 24-hour trip. But it was 24-hour trip. Do you know the word trip? Okay. So repeat it. So it was 24-hour trip by plane and tickets were very expensive. And tickets were very expensive. So Raúl Sebastian and Emma Noon, age 19, looked for cheap tickets on the internet. Looked for cheap tickets on the internet. They were lucky and they booked 2 tickets to Sydney. They booked 2 tickets to Sydney. On August 4th, they arrived at Heathrow Airport. They arrived to Heathrow Airport. It's a name of the airport, Heathrow, in England, in London. Heathrow Airport. They checked in and waited for the plane to leave. Six hours later, they landed. You understand the sentence, right? 6 hours later, they landed at a big airport and changed planes. Emma, I was a little worried because the second plane was very small. I was a little worried because the second plane was very small. But I didn't want to say anything to Raúl. But I didn't want to say anything to Raúl. Translate. I was a little worried because the second plane was very small. I was a little worried. I was a little worried because the second plane was very small, but I didn't want to say anything to Raúl. But I didn't want to say anything to Raul. Okay, now Raul. After only an hour, the plane landed. Do you understand the sentence? Now repeat. After only an hour, the plane landed. After only an hour, the plane landed. We looked out of the window. We looked out of the window. It was a very small airport. We walked to the information desk. And I showed our tickets to the woman. When is our next flight? I asked. When is our next flight? I asked. Translate. She looked at our tickets. The next flight. This is the end of your trip. Where did you want to go? Where are we? I asked. Where are we? I asked. You're in Sydney. We're in Australia. Australia? No, you're in Canada. You're in Canada. Hey, okay, so what happened? Tell me. Tell me what happened with these teenagers. Another city or another country? They wanted to go to Sydney and they arrived to Sydney. But they wanted to go to Australia, but they arrived to what country? Yes, they arrived to Canada. Okay. Let's listen now about Canada, Sydney. Sydney, Nova Scotia, population 26,000. Population 26,000. Raul and Emma were in Sydney. But not Sydney, Australia. They were in Sydney, Nova Scotia, in northeastern Canada. Northeastern Canada. The story of Emma and Raul was on television. Was on television and in newspapers around the world. They stay in Sydney, Nova Scotia for 4 days. Then they traveled home on Air Canada to London. On Air Canada to London, England, not London, Canada. Okay, you got this story about two Sydneys. Hey.